was captured by surveillance footage. So there's going to be a lot of screenshots from the surveillance footage throughout this video, and I'm going to try to paint the picture of the entire night as best as I can and help you follow along with the pictures. Okay, so let's get started. I'm also, by the way, filming this at night, so you will hear a lot of buggy sounds outside, a lot of crickets and such. But I think that's kind of relaxing. So, okay. So we are going to be talking about the disappearance and the murder of a girl named Grace Millane. I hope I'm pronouncing her last name properly. And we're doing an international case today. This did not take place in the United States. So Grace was my age, a few months younger than me. She was born on December 2nd, 1996, and she died December 2nd on her birthday, 2018. Would have been her 22nd birthday. She went missing in Auckland, New Zealand. And although it happened in New Zealand, it sparked international attention. It got quite a bit of media coverage, especially because she wasn't from New Zealand, so it got media coverage in her home, which was in Essex, or Wickford, Essex, which is in East England. She was British. So her attacker was charged for murder on December 8th of that year, 2018. And so let's just give you a little bit of background on Grace and what she was doing in New Zealand. So she had just graduated from the University of London with a bachelor's degree in advertising and marketing. And she was going on a solo backpacking trip. She was taking a little gap year in between graduating and starting the work life. So she was going by herself, which is very brave. And she was so excited, you know, on her Instagram and her Facebook accounts, and her Twitter, she was, you know, tweeting about it. I was so excited. 1 month into leave, everybody in her life knew she was doing it, and she was very excited about it. So she set off on her trip. I believe she started in Peru, and she made her way around. Right before her stop in New Zealand, she spent 6 weeks in South America. She got to New Zealand on November 20th and got to Auckland specifically on November 30th. Now, on December 1st, the day before her birthday, she wanted to go out and celebrate her birthday. She was excited about, the holidays coming up, Christmas, and the area of New Zealand that she was in, started decorating, and she would send her family pictures and things like that. She was very excited, and she wanted to go out. So she went out on December 1st. It was a Saturday night, to meet a guy that she had met on Tinder. She had a little date. His name was Jesse Kempson. So she went out to meet this dude. Little did she know that about 8 months prior to this date, he had gone on another date with a girl he had met on an app, and he very brutally sexually assaulted her. We will talk about her a little bit later towards the end of the video, but this guy had a past of taking girls on dates and being very rough with them. messaged one of her friends from home and said, "I click with him so well." She was having a good time and she wanted to text her best friend, and she said, "I click with him so well." And that would be the last communication she would have with her friends and or family. So Saturday night rolls around. She sets out in a nice black knee-length dress. She's got a little purse on her. She's ready to go. So before we talk about the actual date itself, I'll give you just a little bit of information on Jessie. So Jessie had had a busy few months on Tinder, talking to a bunch of girls, and later on, when he was convicted of all this, a couple of them came forward, and again we'll talk about it a little bit more at the end of the video, but a couple of girls came forward and shared certain conversations that they had, and he told one of them, just an example of one of the conversations, he told her that he liked, quote, feet, dominating, and strangulation. He didn't try to hide it. So he was into very rough sexual activities, one of which, prior to Grace, left her. She survived, but she ended up kind of having to fight for her life, but he was never arrested or convicted of anything, and he was just doing his thing, and he kept going because no one had ever complained or went to the authorities or anything. So he was free to walk the streets and continue to do this to women. So prior to their date, as Grace was getting ready, surveillance camera showed Jessie at a bar called the 𝓢𝓸𝓬𝓲𝓪, where he had 4 beers in a span of 30 minutes, which was a lot. Especially, he was a big guy, but 4 beers in half an hour is excessive, and especially before a date, obviously this dude wasn't normal, but still. So then, eventually, they meet up at the Sky Tower. Now, I'm not too familiar with the Sky Tower, just New Zealand in general, but from what I read, it's a very touristy attraction. It's an icon of the area, and it's very high. You could see it from miles and miles away, so it's a common place, I guess, to visit over there, and she felt comfortable meeting him there because it was so busy and because it was so public. So their first stop, they made a couple stops throughout the night. The first stop was called Andy's Burger and Bar, and again, all of this is seen through camera footage. They're seen getting food and drink at a bar, and then finding a nearby table and chatting and eating and whatever. Now, it's seen on the cameras that Jessie kind of, when it comes to paying the bill, he kind of positions himself in a way where he's the one, he grabs it and he makes sure that he pays, which I didn't fully understand what that meant until the next stop. So the next stop, which they went only 30 minutes later, was to a Mexican cafe. It was literally called Mexican Cafe, and it was right down the block. And they were there for about an hour and a half, an hour and 15 minutes, where in that time they had 2 jugs of margaritas and 1 jug of sangria. For 2 people, that's quite a bit, and if you've had sangria and that stuff, that stuff can creep up on you. So she had had a decent amount of alcohol in her system at this point. And Now, again, it says Jesse arranges himself in a way where he is the one to pay for the bill. So there's, I don't remember if I took a screenshot of this one or not, but there is part of the footage where you can see them both like at the bar, and he positions himself so the check is here, he's here, and she's here, and he kind of turns his back towards her so that she can't really reach the bill. And I was thinking about like why that would be, and I guess he just didn't want any trace of her, you know, like if anyone were to look at her statements or whatever and see that she was there, he didn't want that. So I guess he wasn't thinking of the surveillance footage. I don't know, but he very clearly positioned himself where he was the one that was gonna pay. But I'm sure he passed it off as like him being chivalrous, right, and wanting to pay for her. The next stop, they go to the 𝓢𝓸𝓬𝓲𝓪, which is where he had been drinking by himself prior to the date, if you remember. And there they order more drinks, and they're seen talking. They get a table. They both seem very comfortable. She seems very, very into him. He seems very at ease. Around 8:40 p.m., Jesse puts his hand on the back of her head and pulls her in for a kiss. They kiss for just like a second or so, nothing crazy. Over the next hour, though, they're seen kissing several times, so they're getting comfortable with each other. So at one point, he walks out of camera range, so he either goes to the bathroom or another part of the bar, I don't know. And you see her checking her phone, and this is where she sends that message to her friend saying, "We just click so well." Then he comes back, and she steps out of range. I'm gonna assume that she went to the bathroom, and he goes on his phone. And this, actually what he does here, is what led police on his trail, what got them on his trail once she went missing. He went and left a Facebook comment on her profile picture, even though he was with her. We'll talk about that a little bit later, but you can see him doing that in the surveillance footage. Around 9:30 p.m., they are getting ready to leave, and they head to the City Life hotel lobby where he had a room in that hotel. And they are seen getting on the elevator. She is all smiles. She is, you know, she's having a good time. She is feeling this dude. You see him fumbling for his key card, and they move towards his room, room 308. Now, what happened in that room is not exactly clear because the surveillance footage kind of stops there. But Grace did not make it out of that room alive. Once she died, he did not call for emergency services, no ambulance, didn't call for the hotel, nothing, didn't call for help at all. She is unfortunately gone. She's dead by 1:30 a.m. And at this point, he had made multiple internet searches on his phone, and it showed how basically he was planning to conceal what had happened, to hide what happened to her. So he looked up hottest fire, not exactly sure what that means. He also looked up 𝓢𝓸𝓬𝓲𝓪 ranges, which is, I guess, a place in that area, which is where he would later try to dig a shallow grave and try to bury her body. He also, while still in the hotel room, went on a pornography site for a bit. He also then took intimate photos of Grace on his phone, including close-up photos. He very clearly manipulated her body to get the poses that he wanted. Super, super sick. The next morning, her body was still in the room, and Jesse texted another girl from Tinder trying to set up a date for later that day. Gross. So, later on that morning, he was caught by more surveillance footage buying a suitcase. It was a gray suitcase. He then went to a supermarket to buy cleaning products. And then he went to a car rental place. And then after he did all that, again, Grace still in the hotel room, he goes on this date with the girl he was texting. She was a 27-year-old woman who said Jesse was, quote, very intense, but quite calm. He then, during their conversations, he started telling her, like, all his friends were cops, and they started discussing a murder trial that they were both familiar with. I don't know where that came from, but they were discussing a murder trial. And she recalls him saying, it's crazy how guys can make one wrong move and go to jail for the rest of their life. He then went on to talk about the fact that he had heard of a guy who liked rough sex, and how when having sex with whoever it was, it went wrong and she died. And later, like when prosecution was, finding out about all this, they said that they believed he was testing out the story of what he wanted to do to this girl, and wanted to talk to her about it and like kind of gauge her reaction. And as their conversation was going on, she just increasingly became uneasy and she got a bad feeling, and she cut the date short. And she left, and she purposely did not go straight to her car, which was so smart because she just got a feeling about this dude, and she was like, what if he follows me? That was probably a smart move, honestly. And he had texted her later and asked for a second date, which she denied. So that girl was smart. So that was like an early date, actually, during the day. At 5:45 that same day, Jesse went and rented a rug doctor, which was a machine that cleaned rugs. And he bought it to bring to the hotel to try to clean the carpet thoroughly. But he told the shop that he bought it from, or rented it from, that it was to remove a red wine stain. Later during the trial, when they took pictures of the hotel room, they showed a picture of his room, and the officer had used luminol, which is a chemical that reveals blood stains out of carpets. Even after people try to like clean up the blood, you can't really fully take it out, and that chemical reveals, it like turns purple. And so they could see that it had been attempted to have been cleaned up, but there was still very visibly blood in the carpet, deep in the carpet. It's just a side note, but he went upstairs with the rug doctor and the suitcases and all that. Then, let's see, I lost my place, I'm sorry. He's then seen taking his red rental car, parking it outside of the hotel, getting a trolley, like, those, like the bellhop carts that you put your suitcases on, brings it upstairs, and then comes down with the suitcase, and basically he had put her in like fetal position and put her in the suitcase, and that's how he attempted to bring her out of the hotel. Video surveillance also shows that day where he was loading the car and, trying to carry out his plan, he had changed his clothes multiple times throughout the day. I guess he was trying to be smart all of a sudden. At 6:15 a.m. the next morning, he had been seen leaving the hotel, but he had stopped at a shop right outside of town after, it's now December 3rd, and Grace is officially reported missing. From her parents back home, they became very concerned when she wasn't responding to their birthday messages, and of course her friends were trying to wish her happy birthday, and there was no response. So it was very clear that something had gone wrong and something had happened to her, so they reported her missing. But they knew that she had been in New Zealand, obviously, so that helped things. That was my stomach, I'm sorry. So right away, a manhunt ensued, and Jesse was one of the first ones wanted for questioning because of his comment on her Facebook page. It was on her profile picture, and he commented, "Beautiful, comma, very radiant." And he had commented that just 11 minutes before they left that bar and went to his hotel room. So that was very suspicious, and he was one of the first people wanted for questioning. So a detective by the name of Diana Levinson messaged him and asked for him to get in touch with her. They spoke the next morning, and he told her that he had indeed met up with Grace that night on Saturday, but he said that they parted ways at 10 p.m. and that was the last he ever saw of her. He was then contacted by another detective who asked him to come in, and he agreed to go in the next day and give a formal statement. But before he was able to go in, he was spotted by another detective in the hotel room lobby, and they had not expected to see him there, and they were a little suspicious about it. So they basically kind of took him and said, "Alright, you're coming in for an interview right now." So they took him down, had an interview, and meanwhile they were already obtaining all of the surveillance footage of her from that night, and the hotel gave them surveillance footage, and you could very clearly see them going up to his room. So it was very clear right away that he was lying about the fact that they had parted ways at 10 p.m. So at that point, there wasn't much that he could do. So by his second interview, he had no choice but to confess to the fact that he had killed Grace. But his story now was that they engaged in sexual activities. She asked him to choke her, and it went wrong, and he accidentally killed her. That was his story. During the trial, the jury completely rejected that claim, and he was found guilty. Now, there was media coverage about this already, so his picture was in the media, and now this is where these girls who had gone out with him prior started to come forward. The girl from 8 months before that I mentioned earlier, she came in to testify, told her story, and when addressing him, she said, quote, "Every time I went to sleep, I'd see your eyes popping out of your head, staring at me in anger." And multiple women, like I said, came forward, including an ex-girlfriend that he actually lived with, and he was not a nice boyfriend to her. He threatened her. He was, just like sexually violent, abusive, and I think he threatened her with a butcher knife, according to her testimony. And all throughout the trial, he showed no remorse. People saw him as a sociopath, and he was saying, you have no grounds to convict me on, and he wasn't sorry, and even if you were to accidentally kill someone, you'd be like, "Oh my god, I'm so sorry." He was not like that at all. And so in the end, he was jailed for only 17 years, which I don't fully understand that, but he only got 17 years, so he'll get out. I'm not entirely sure how old he is, so I don't know how old he will be when he gets out, but he only got 17 years. And now officials, after her body had been found in analyzed and whatever. Officials said considerable force would have been required to kill her. She was killed around her neck. That was his thing. And they said the pressure on her neck must have lasted between 4 and 5 minutes to be enough to kill her. So you can imagine 4 to 5 minutes of a big guy on top of you, strangling you like that. And those are her last minutes, and that's so sad and terrifying. And that is how she went. And that is the story of Grace Millane. So, I hope that I made this case easy enough to follow along with. Hopefully the pictures helped to paint a picture for you. I hope that you guys enjoyed listening. And thank you so much for watching.